Have you ever had one of those moments where everything in your life feels completely normal, and then in the span of 3 seconds, everything you thought you knew just shatters? Not slowly, not gradually, but all at once. Like the ground underneath you opens up and suddenly you're falling and there's nothing to grab onto. Have you ever looked at your phone expecting nothing and seen something that made your hands go cold? Something that made your chest tighten so fast you couldn't tell if you were having a panic attack or if the world was actually ending? Now, imagine you're a father, a single father, and you've spent the last 2 years building a life out of the wreckage someone else left behind. You've spent 730 days waking up before the sun to make breakfast and pack lunches and iron tiny little outfits and brush tangled hair and answer 1,000 questions before 8 in the morning. You held your daughter when she cried at night asking where her mommy went, and you looked her in the eyes and said something you weren't even sure was true. "It's going to be okay, baby. Daddy's here. Daddy's not going anywhere." And you meant that. God, you meant that with every single broken piece of your heart, because you knew what it felt like to be left. You knew what it felt like to be a child staring at a door wondering if your parent was ever going to walk back through it. And you swore on everything you had that your daughter would never feel that, not on your watch, not while you were breathing. So you did it. You did it, all of it, alone. No co-parent, no partner, no one to hand her off when you were so tired your vision was blurring. No one to tell you that you were doing a good job when it felt like you were failing at everything. You figured it out because that's what fathers do when they actually show up. You don't get a manual. You don't get a round of applause. You just get a little girl looking up at you like you're the whole world, and that's enough to keep you going even on the days when you want to collapse. That was James. 34 years old, IT security specialist by day, full-time single father by every other hour of his life, raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily in a modest 3-bedroom house in Charlotte, North Carolina, a house that he bought with his ex-wife Nicole 3 years before she vanished, a house that still had her fingerprints on the door frames if you looked close enough, a house that James thought about selling 100 times but never did, because Lily once said this is where mommy lived, and James didn't have the heart to take that away from her too. Every Tuesday night, James and Lily had a tradition, the one thing that was sacred in their week. They went to a little diner called Rosie's, about 15 minutes from their house. Nothing fancy. Cracked vinyl booths, sticky menus, a waitress named Donna who always called Lily sugar and brought her extra fries without being asked. It wasn't about the food. It was about the ritual, the consistency. James read somewhere that children who experience abandonment need routines. They need things they can count on, things that don't change, things that show up every single week without fail. So Tuesday night at Rosie's became their anchor, rain or shine, good days or bad days, whether James had a migraine or Lily had a meltdown at school, or the bills were piling up, or the loneliness was so heavy James could barely get off the couch. Tuesday night they went to Rosie's, period. And on this particular Tuesday, everything was normal, painfully, beautifully normal. Lily was sitting across from him in the booth with her legs swinging because they were too short to reach the floor. She had her purple crayon in one hand and a chicken tender in the other, and she was coloring a picture of a cat on the kids menu with the kind of focus that only an 8-year-old can have. Tongue sticking out slightly, eyebrows furrowed, completely lost in her own little world. And James was watching her. Not eating, just watching. Because sometimes that's what single parents do. They just look at their kid and feel everything at once. The love, the fear, the pride, the grief, the overwhelming weight of knowing that this tiny human being is depending on you and only you, and there is no safety net and no backup plan, and if you fall, there is nobody to catch either of you. James picked up a fry and smiled at her. She looked up and smiled back. That gap-toothed grin that could fix anything. "Daddy, do cats have belly buttons?" And James laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, the kind that single parents don't get to experience often enough because most of their energy goes to surviving, not laughing. He said, "I don't know, baby, we'll Google it when we get home." And she nodded, satisfied with that answer, and went back to coloring. That was the last normal moment. Because right then, his phone buzzed. Not a text, not a call, a notification from his home security app, the one he installed himself, because that's what he did for a living. Cameras on the front door, cameras on the back door, motion sensors in the hallway, one camera in the living room, one camera pointed at the garage.
The system was top tier because James didn't play when it came to keeping his little girl safe. He'd seen too many news stories, read too many headlines. He knew what the world could do, and he wasn't going to let it anywhere near his little girl. The notification said, "Motion detected, interior, Lily's bedroom." James frowned. Interior motion. That meant someone or something had triggered the sensor inside the house, not outside, not at the door, inside, in his daughter's bedroom. James's first thought was the cat. They didn't have a cat. His second thought was maybe he left a window open and the curtain moved, but the sensor was heat-based. It detected body heat, not fabric. He tapped the notification. The app opened, the live feed loaded, and for 2 seconds the screen was just dark, grainy footage of Lily's bedroom, lit only by the glow of her little nightlight, the one shaped like a crescent moon, the one Nicole bought her when she was a baby. And then he saw her. A woman standing in the middle of Lily's bedroom. Her back was to the camera, but James didn't need to see her face. He knew that silhouette like he knew his own heartbeat. The way she stood, the way her shoulders curved, the way her left hand always rested on her hip when she was thinking. He had memorized that shape. He had loved that shape. He had reached for that shape in the dark 1,000 nights and found nothing but cold sheets and empty space. It was Nicole. His ex-wife, Lily's mother, the woman who walked out of their lives 2 years ago without a single word of explanation, the woman he filed a missing persons report for, the woman he sat up crying over at 2 in the morning while her baby slept in the next room, the woman whose voicemail he called over and over just to hear her voice, because that was all he had left, the woman he forced himself to stop loving because the love was killing him. She was in his house, in their daughter's bedroom, at 7:45 on a Tuesday night while he and Lily sat in a diner 15 minutes away, eating chicken tenders and talking about whether cats have belly buttons. James's hand started shaking. The phone almost slipped from his fingers. He gripped it tighter. His eyes were locked on the screen. Nicole was still there, still searching, still frantic. He watched her pull a box from the back of the closet, a box he'd never seen before. She opened it, looked inside, and her whole body changed. Her shoulders dropped, her head fell forward. She pressed something from that box against her chest and just stood there, not moving, not searching anymore, just holding whatever it was like it was the most important thing in the world. And then, James saw something that broke him in a way he didn't expect. Nicole turned slightly toward Lily's bed. She reached down and picked up Lily's stuffed elephant, the one she slept with every single night, the one she named Piat, the one she couldn't fall asleep without. Nicole held that stuffed elephant to her face and her shoulders started shaking. She was crying, pressing her daughter's stuffed animal against her cheek in the dark in a room that still smelled like the little girl she left behind. James's eyes burned. He blinked hard, swallowed, looked across the table at Lily, who was now drawing a second cat next to the first one, completely unaware that her mother was 15 minutes away, standing in her daughter's bedroom, crying into the stuffed animal she kissed goodnight every evening. What do you do with that? What do you do when the person who destroyed you shows up looking just as destroyed? What do you do when the anger and the heartbreak and the love all hate you at the same time, so hard that you can't tell which one is which? James didn't know. He didn't have answers. He didn't have a plan. All he had was a phone screen showing him a ghost standing in his daughter's bedroom and a little girl sitting across from him who trusted him to keep the world from falling apart. He closed the app, put the phone in his pocket, looked at Lily and said, "Hey, sweetheart, how about we finish up and head home a little early tonight?" Lily looked up. "Can I get ice cream first?" James almost broke right there. Almost, but he held it, the way he always held it, the way single parents hold everything, with both hands and no help, and the quiet prayer that it'll be enough. "Yeah, baby, you can get ice cream." He flagged down Donna, ordered the ice cream, and while Lily ate it happily with chocolate sauce dripping down her chin, James sat across from her with his heart pounding and his mind spinning, and one single question repeating over and over in his head like a siren. What was Nicole looking for in their daughter's bedroom, and why tonight, after 2 years of silence? Something was wrong. James could feel it in his bones. Not just wrong like unexpected, wrong like dangerous, wrong like the kind of thing that doesn't end at a security camera notification, wrong like the beginning of something he wasn't ready for. But ready or not, it had already started. and there was no turning back now. For that security notification to hit James the way it did, you have to understand where this man came from, what he was built from, what broke him before Nicole ever got the chance to. Because James didn't just wake up one day and become a single father. He was shaped for it, molded by pain, trained by absence, hardened by a childhood that taught him one lesson above all others. People leave. That's what people do. They leave. James Marcus Whitfield was born in Detroit, Michigan on a January night so cold the pipes in the hospital froze. His mother Gloria was 21 years old, tired, beautiful, stubborn in the way that Black women have to be when the world gives them nothing but reasons to quit. She worked at a laundromat 6 days a week, folding other people's clothes for minimum wage, and came home every night smelling like fabric softener and exhaustion. She loved James with a ferocity that scared people, the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission, the kind that says, I may not have much, but everything I have is yours. His father was a man named Curtis, and the less said about Curtis is better. That's what Gloria always told people when they asked. But James remembered more than his mother thought he did. He remembered the sound of Curtis's work boots on the kitchen floor. He remembered the smell of motor oil and cigarettes. He remembered being lifted onto Curtis's shoulders in the backyard and feeling like he was on top of the world. He remembered laughing. He remembered feeling safe. And that's what made it so much worse, because the memories weren't bad. The memories were good. And good memories of someone who abandoned you are the cruelest kind because they don't let you hate them the way you need to. Curtis left when James was 4. Didn't die, didn't go to prison, didn't get deployed overseas. He just left. Packed a bag one Tuesday morning when Gloria was at work and James was watching cartoons on the living room floor. James remembered hearing the front door open. He remembered looking up and seeing his father standing in the doorway with a duffel bag over his shoulder. Curtis looked at him. James remembered that look. Not guilt exactly, something flatter than guilt, something more like resignation, like a man who had already made his decision and was just going through the motions of the exit. Curtis said, "Be good for your mama." That's it. 4 words. No hug, no kiss on the forehead, no I'll call you, no I'll come back. Just be good for your mama. And then the door closed, and James sat there on the carpet with his cereal getting soggy and his cartoon still playing, and a feeling in his chest that he wouldn't have the vocabulary to describe for another 20 years. Abandonment. That word wouldn't enter his conscious mind until he was in therapy at age 29, sitting across from a woman named Dr. Perry, who looked at him over her glasses and said, "James, you have a textbook abandonment wound, and it's driving every relationship you've ever had." He didn't argue with her. He knew she was right. He'd known it long before she said it. He just never had the courage to say it out loud because saying it made it real, and real things can hurt you in ways that buried things can't. After Curtis left, Gloria did what Black mothers in Detroit do. She survived. She didn't have the luxury of a breakdown. She didn't get to take a mental health day. She didn't get to process her grief on a therapist's couch. She had a 4-year-old who needed to eat, and a rent check that was due in 9 days, and a car that barely started in the winter, and a world that didn't care that her heart was broken. So she pushed through. She doubled her hours at the laundromat. She picked up weekend shifts cleaning office buildings downtown. She braided hair in the kitchen for extra cash, the same way so many Black mothers do, turning their hands into tools of survival when the system gives them nothing else. And James watched all of it. He watched his mother work herself to the bone. He watched her fall asleep at the kitchen table with a calculator in one hand and a stock of bills in the other. He cried exactly once. Only once. It was a Sunday night, and he thought he was asleep, but he wasn't. He was standing in the hallway in his pajamas, watching through a crack in her bedroom door, as she sat on the edge of her bed holding a photograph. He couldn't see what photograph it was. He didn't need to. He already knew. She held it to her chest and cried so quietly it barely made a sound, like she'd trained herself to cry without making noise so her son wouldn't hear her. And James stood there in that hallway at 5 years old and made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would never make a woman cry like that. He would never leave someone he was supposed to love. He would never be Curtis. That promise lived inside him like a second skeleton. It held him up. It structured every choice he made. He was the kid who never missed school because showing up mattered. He was the teenager who worked at the grocery store after class and gave half his paycheck to Gloria even though she told him to keep it. He was the young man who got a scholarship to a state college and studied information technology because it was stable, and stable meant he could provide, and providing meant he wouldn't end up like Curtis, standing in a doorway with a bag, choosing to walk away from everything that mattered. James was disciplined, focused, quiet in the way that men who grew up too fast are always quiet. He didn't party much in college. He didn't chase girls. He had a couple of relationships, but nothing that stuck, because the moment things got serious, the fear would kick in. Not fear of commitment, fear of failure. Fear that he'd get close to someone and then, somehow, without meaning to, turn into his father. That's the thing about abandonment wounds. They don't just make you afraid of being left. They make you afraid of becoming the person who leaves. And James carried that double-edged terror everywhere he went. He graduated, got a job at a cybersecurity firm in Charlotte, moved out of Detroit for the first time in his life. Gloria cried at the bus station, but she was smiling through the tears. She held his face in her hands and said, "You did it, baby. You got out. Now go build something beautiful." And James hugged her so tight he could feel her heartbeat against his chest. And he whispered, "I'm going to make you proud, Mama." And she said, "Boy, you already have." Charlotte was different, warmer, slower, less concrete, and more sky. James got an apartment. A small one-bedroom with thin walls and a window that overlooked a parking lot. But it was his. He bought a coffee table from a thrift store and a couch that smelled like someone else's house, and he sat in that apartment on his first night and felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. Like maybe this was where the cycle breaks. Maybe this was where the story changes. Maybe Detroit and Curtis and the cold pipes and the soggy cereal and the sound of a closing door were all part of a chapter that was finally ending. He threw himself into work, became one of the best at the firm, got promoted twice in 3 years. His specialty was home security systems. The irony wasn't lost on him. A man who spent his childhood feeling unsafe, now making a living by keeping other people safe. He understood security not as a technical concept, but as an emotional one. He knew what it felt like to live in a house where the locks didn't matter, because the danger wasn't outside, it was inside. It was the person who was supposed to stay, but didn't. So when he designed security systems, he didn't just think about cameras and sensors. He thought about the feeling a family gets when they know someone is watching over them. He built systems that said, "You're protected, you're seen, nothing is going to happen to you on my watch." And every single time he installed one, he felt a small, quiet sense of healing, like he was retroactively building the safety he never had as a child. But work could only fill so much of the emptiness. The loneliness was still there. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that makes you cry in public. The slow kind, the kind that sits in your apartment with you on a Friday night when everyone else is living their lives. The kind that makes the silence feel heavy instead of peaceful. The kind that makes you scroll through your phone looking for someone to call, but realizing there's nobody who would understand the specific weight you're carrying. James had friends. Derek from work, who was loud and funny and always trying to drag James to bars and cookouts. A couple of guys from college who texted occasionally, but none of them knew the real James. None of them knew about Curtis. None of them knew about the hallway and the photograph and the quiet crying. None of them knew that James went home every night to an empty apartment and sometimes stood in his kitchen with his hands on the counter and his head down, just breathing. Just trying to feel something other than the low hum of loneliness that had been his background music for as long as he can remember. He was 28 when he started thinking maybe this was it. Maybe this was his life. Work, apartment, sleep, repeat. Maybe the cycle he was trying to break wasn't about leaving. Maybe it was about being alone. Maybe the Whitfield men were just destined to end up by themselves one way or another. Curtis did it by walking out. Maybe James was doing it by never letting anyone in. And then he met Nicole. It was a Saturday afternoon in October. James was at a coffee shop near his apartment, the kind of place with exposed brick and acoustic guitar playing from a speaker, and baristas who spell your name wrong on purpose because they think it's charming. He was sitting alone, reading something on his laptop, when a woman walked in and ordered a chai latte and then turned around to find a seat, and there were no seats available except the one across from James. She pointed at the chair. "Do you mind?" James looked up, and the first thing he noticed wasn't how beautiful she was, although she was. It wasn't her smile, although that would come to wreck him in ways he couldn't imagine. The first thing he noticed was her eyes. They had something in them that he recognized immediately, a tiredness that had nothing to do with sleep, a weight that most people wouldn't see, but James saw it because he carried the same weight, and people who
We carry heavy things can always spot each other in a crowd. He said, "Go ahead." She sat down, sipped her latte, pulled out a book, and for 20 minutes they didn't say a word to each other. Just two strangers sitting across from each other in a coffee shop, pretending to focus on their own things while quietly wondering about the person 2 feet away. James spoke first. He never spoke first. He asked her what she was reading. She showed him the cover. It was a novel about a woman who disappears and the family she leaves behind, trying to understand why. James would think about that book years later and wonder if the universe had been trying to warn him that day, if the answer to everything had been sitting right there on that book cover and he was too busy falling in love to read it. They talked for 2 hours. Her name was Nicole. She was from Virginia. She had moved to Charlotte a year ago. She worked as a medical billing specialist at a clinic downtown. She was warm, funny in a quiet, understated way. She laughed at things that weren't obviously funny, and James found that incredibly attractive because it meant she was paying attention to the layers, not just the surface. But there were moments, small ones, almost invisible, moments where Nicole would drift. Mid-sentence, she would lose focus for a second. Her eyes would shift to the door of the coffee shop like she was checking to see if someone had followed her. Then she'd snap back and smile and keep talking like nothing happened. James noticed. He didn't say anything, but he noticed. They exchanged numbers. He texted her that night. She texted back immediately. And just like that, the loneliness that had been sitting in James' apartment for years shifted over a little bit and made room for someone else. He didn't know it yet, couldn't have known it. But that Saturday afternoon in a coffee shop with exposed brick and misspelled names and a book about a woman who disappears was the beginning of everything. Everything beautiful. And everything that would eventually break him in ways Curtis never could. Because Curtis broke James by leaving. Nicole would break him by making him believe she'd stay. And the difference between those two kinds of breaking is the difference between a wound that heals and a wound that doesn't know it's bleeding. James was about to bleed for a very long time. He just didn't know it yet. James and Nicole moved fast. Not reckless fast, not the kind of fast that makes your friends pull you aside and say, "Slow down, you barely know this person." It was more like the kind of fast that happens when two people who have been lonely for a long time finally find someone who makes the loneliness quiet. Like two magnets that spent years spinning in circles finally snapping together. It felt inevitable. It felt like relief. And for James, it felt like proof. Proof that he wasn't destined to end up alone. Proof that the Whitfield curse, or whatever he'd been calling it in his head, was finally broken. He found someone. She stayed. She kept staying. And every morning he woke up next to her was another morning where he wasn't Curtis. They dated for 8 months before Nicole moved into his apartment. She didn't have much, a few boxes of clothes, some books, a small jewelry box that she kept on the nightstand and never opened in front of him. James asked her about it once. She smiled and said, "Just some old stuff from my family, nothing important." He didn't push. That was one of James's strengths and also one of his biggest weaknesses. He didn't push.
He gave people space. He let them come to him on their own terms because that's what he wished someone had done for him when he was a kid sitting on a carpet watching his father walk out. He wished someone had just let him feel what he needed to feel without forcing him to explain it. So he gave Nicole that same grace, that same room to breathe. But the thing about giving someone too much room is that sometimes they use that room to hide. And Nicole was hiding. James could feel it. Not constantly, not obviously, but in small moments that added up over time like drops of water filling a glass so slowly you don't notice it's about to overflow. She would get phone calls and leave the room, not every time, just sometimes, and when she came back, her energy would be different, tighter, like she was holding something in her chest and pressing it down with both hands. James would ask, "Everything okay?" And she would say, "Yeah, just my sister being dramatic," or "just work stuff." And she would kiss him and change the subject. And James would let her because he didn't want to be the kind of man who interrogates the woman he loves. He didn't want to be controlling. He didn't want to be paranoid. He wanted to be safe. He wanted to be the place she could land. So he let it go. Every single time he let it go. They got married 14 months after they met. Small ceremony. Courthouse. Gloria flew in from Detroit and cried through the entire thing. Derek was the best man and gave a toast that was way too long, but everyone laughed anyway. Nicole's side was thin. Her mother had passed years ago. She had one sister named Vanessa who came but seemed distracted the entire time. Kept checking her phone, kept looking at Nicole with an expression James couldn't read. Not happiness exactly, something closer to worry, like she was watching someone walk across a frozen lake and waiting for the crack. James noticed, but again, he didn't push. He told himself it was just family dynamics. Every family is complicated. Not every look means something. He was projecting his own fears onto normal situations. That's what Dr. Perry had told him during one of their sessions. Not everything is a sign of abandonment, James. Sometimes people are just having a bad day. So he let it go. He danced with his wife. He kissed her in front of everyone. He carried her over the threshold of their apartment like something out of a movie, and she laughed so hard she snorted, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. For a while, things were good. Really good. The kind of good that makes you suspicious if you grew up the way James did because you've been trained to believe that good things are just the setup for bad things. But James fought that instinct. He told himself, this is real. This is yours. You're allowed to have this. And he almost believed it. They bought the house, the 3-bedroom in the quiet neighborhood with the big backyard and the oak tree that dropped leaves everywhere in the fall. James installed the security system himself. Every camera, every sensor, every wire. Nicole watched him do it and teased him. "You act like we're living in a fortress." And James laughed and said, "Just keeping my girls safe." He didn't know why he said girls plural. They weren't pregnant yet, weren't even trying, but the word came out like a prophecy, like somewhere deep inside him he already knew what was coming. 6 months after they moved into the house, Nicole told James she was pregnant. She did it in the simplest way possible. No big reveal, no surprise dinner. She just walked into the living room where he was watching basketball and sat next to him and said, "I'm pregnant, James." And his whole body went still. Not scared, not upset. Still, like the world stopped spinning for a second and rearranged itself around this new piece of information. He looked at her. She was watching his face the way people do when they're not sure how the other person is going to react. And James did something that surprised both of them. He started crying. Not sad crying, the overwhelmed kind. The kind that comes when something you wanted so badly but were too afraid to say out loud suddenly becomes real. He pulled her into his arms and held her and said, "I'm going to be a good father, I promise you. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be everything." And Nicole held him back and whispered, "I know you will." But even in that moment, even in the middle of the most beautiful news of his life, James felt something he couldn't explain. A shift, tiny, almost imperceptible, like a tremor before an earthquake. Nicole was happy, yes, but underneath the happiness there was something else. That same tightness he'd noticed before, that same invisible weight pressing down on her chest. Her smile was real, but it wasn't complete, like she was smiling through glass, present but separated by something he couldn't see. James told himself it was nerves, first-time mother, hormones, normal anxiety. He told himself all the rational things because the irrational ones were too terrifying to consider. The pregnancy changed Nicole, not in the ways the books warned about, not the cravings and the mood swings and the nesting instinct. Those things happened, sure, but there was something else, something the books didn't cover. Nicole became secretive, more secretive than before. The phone calls increased. She started locking her phone, which she'd never done. She would disappear for hours on Saturday afternoons and come back and say she was at the store, but there were never any bags. She started sleeping less. James would wake up at 2 a.m. and find her sitting in the living room in the dark, staring at nothing. Just sitting there with her hands on her belly and her eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance, like she was watching something approach that only she could see. He asked her about it multiple times. Each conversation went the same way. "Nicole, talk to me. What's going on?" And she would look at him with those tired eyes and say, "Nothing, baby. I'm just anxious about the baby, first-time mom stuff." And she would smile, that incomplete smile. And James would hold her hand and say, "We're in this together. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out." And she would nod and squeeze his hand, and for a moment things would feel okay. But okay kept getting shorter. The spaces between them were filling up with silence, and silence in a marriage is never empty. It's always full of the things no one is saying. Lily was born on a Wednesday morning in March, 7 pounds 4 ounces. Perfect, screaming, alive. James held her for the first time and felt something he had never felt in his entire life. Not just love, completion, like there had been a missing piece inside him since that Tuesday morning when Curtis walked out, and now, 30 years later, that piece had finally been returned. Not from Curtis, not from Gloria, not from Nicole, by this tiny screaming baby with her fists balled up and her eyes squeezed shut. She fixed something in James that he didn't even know was still broken. He looked at Nicole, lying in the hospital bed, exhausted and beautiful, and said, "We made something perfect." And Nicole looked at Lily, and her face did something James would replay in his mind 1,000 times over the next 2 years. She smiled, but her eyes filled with tears. Not happy tears, not exhausted tears, scared tears, the kind of tears that come when you're looking at something precious and you already know it's going to be taken from you. James saw it. He saw it clearly, and for the first time, he didn't let it go. "Nicole, what's wrong? Talk to me." She wiped her eyes quickly, shook her head. "I'm fine. I'm just overwhelmed. She's so beautiful, James." "I know she is, but that's not why you're crying." Nicole looked at him, and for 1 second, one brief, terrifying second, he saw something in her eyes that looked like a confession trying to escape. Her lips parted slightly, her chest rose like she was about to take a deep breath and say something that would change everything, and James leaned forward, ready, finally ready to hear whatever she'd been carrying. But then the nurse walked in, checked the monitors, asked Nicole how she was feeling, and the moment shattered like glass on a tile floor. Nicole blinked, smiled at the nurse, said, "I'm fine, just tired," and whatever she was about to say crawled back inside her and buried itself deeper than before. James never got that moment back. He would think about it for years, lying awake at night, replaying it in his head. What was she going to say? What was sitting right there on the edge of her lips? If the nurse had walked in 10 seconds later, would everything be different? Would Nicole have told him the truth? Would she have stayed? He would never know, because 18 months later, Nicole was gone. It wasn't dramatic. That's what haunted him the most. There was no fight, no screaming match, no thrown plates or...
There was no final argument that built to a breaking point. It was a Monday morning. James woke up at 6:15. Lily was still sleeping in her crib. The house was quiet. He reached across the bed and Nicole's side was empty. The sheets were cold, not warm, she just got up cold. Hours cold, like she hadn't been there for a long time. He got up, checked the bathroom, empty. Checked the kitchen, empty. Checked the living room, empty. Her car was in the driveway, her purse was on the counter, her phone was on the nightstand. Everything she owned was still in the house, but she wasn't. He called her name, nothing. He walked through every room, nothing. He opened the back door and checked the yard, nothing. He stood in the middle of his living room at 6:22 in the morning with his heart hammering and his daughter sleeping 10 feet away, and a silence so heavy it pressed down on his skull. She was gone. Not her stuff, not her car, not her phone. Just her. Like she'd evaporated, like she'd been erased from the house, but everything she touched remained. James called her sister Vanessa. No answer. He called her 3 more times. No answer. He called the police, filed a missing persons report. 2 officers came to the house and asked questions that made James feel like a suspect. Did you 2 argue recently, sir? Was she seeing anyone else? Has she ever threatened to leave? He answered everything through clenched teeth because he was trying very hard to not lose his mind in front of his 18-month-old daughter, who had just woken up and was now sitting in her high chair babbling and reaching for her sippy cup, completely unaware that her mother had vanished from the earth. 3 days passed. Nothing. No calls, no texts, no sightings. James barely slept. He held Lily constantly, like if he put her down, she might disappear too. Gloria flew in from Detroit and took over the house, cooking, cleaning, holding Lily while James sat on the porch, staring at the street like Nicole might just walk back up the driveway any minute. Then, on the 4th day, Vanessa finally called back. James picked up before the first ring finished. "Where is she, Vanessa? Where is Nicole?" Vanessa's voice was flat, not emotional, not concerned, flat, like she was reading from a script she'd rehearsed. "She's alive, James. She left on her own. She's not missing, she's not in danger, she just left." "What do you mean she just left? Left where? Left why? We have a daughter, Vanessa. She has a baby." "I know. Then where is she?" "I can't tell you that. You can't or you won't." Silence. "Vanessa, please, I'm begging you, just tell me why. Just give me something, anything." And Vanessa said something that would carve itself into James's memory like a scar that never fades. "Stop looking for her, James, for your sake and for Lily's. Just stop." Then she hung up. James stood in his kitchen holding the phone to his ear, listening to the deadline for 45 seconds before his hand dropped to his side. Gloria was standing in the doorway, holding Lily on her hip. She didn't ask what Vanessa said. She could see it on his face. Whatever hope he'd been holding on to for the past 4 days had just been severed. Gloria walked over, put her free hand on her son's shoulder, and said the only thing a mother can say when her child is in pain she can't fix. "We're going to get through this, baby. You and Lily, you're going to be okay." James looked at his mother, then at Lily. His daughter was reaching for him, arms outstretched, fingers opening and closing, that universal baby gesture that says, "Pick me up, hold me, I want you." He took her from Gloria, held her against his chest, felt her tiny heartbeat against his, and he made the same promise he'd been making his entire life, the one that started in a hallway in Detroit watching his mother cry through a cracked door, the one that became his identity, his armor, his reason for breathing. "I will not leave. I will not break. I am not Curtis. I will be enough." He had to be, because now there was no one else. Just James, just Lily, just a house full of Nicole's things and a silence that used to be a marriage, and a little girl who would grow up and eventually ask the one question James had no answer for. "Daddy, where did Mommy go?"
He wasn't ready for that question. He would never be ready for that question. But it was coming. And so was something else. Something he couldn't see yet. Something hiding in a box at the top of his daughter's closet. Something Nicole had buried in this house like a time bomb wrapped in baby blankets. Something that would sit there for 2 years, ticking silently in the dark, waiting for the night when a security camera would catch a ghost, and a father would finally start asking the questions he should have been asking all along. But that night hadn't come yet. Not yet. First, James had to survive. First, he had to learn how to be a single father. First, he had to teach himself how to braid hair and cook dinner and check homework and sing lullabies and explain to an 18-month-old in words she couldn't understand that mommy wasn't coming home tonight. Not tomorrow, maybe not ever. And he had to do all of that while pretending he was dying inside. Because that's what single fathers do. They die quietly so their children can live loudly. And James was very, very good at dying quietly.
2 years. That's how long James survived on autopilot. 730 days of waking up before his body was ready and going to bed long after his mind had stopped functioning. 2 years of school drop-offs and pickups and parent-teacher conferences where he was the only father sitting alone in a room full of couples. 2 years of grocery shopping with a toddler on his hip and a list on his phone and the constant low-grade panic of wondering if he was buying the right things. Does she need more vegetables? Is she drinking enough water? Is this the right kind of milk? Should I be buying organic? Do other parents buy organic? Am I already failing? That's the thing about single fatherhood that nobody talks about. It's not just the big stuff, it's the small stuff. The relentless, never-ending tsunami of small stuff that crashes into you every single day, and nobody is there to help you clean it up. It's the permission slips that need to be signed. It's the shoes that need to be replaced every 3 months because her feet won't stop growing. It's the birthday parties she gets invited to, and you have to buy a gift and wrap it and drive her there and make small talk with parents who look at you like you're a science experiment. A single father? Where's the mother? What happened? What did you do? They never say it out loud, but you can see it in their eyes. That split-second judgment where they're trying to figure out if you're the victim or the villain in whatever story ended with you raising this child alone. James got used to it, not comfortable with it. You never get comfortable with being judged, but he got used to the rhythm of it. The way conversations would shift when people found out he was doing it alone. The slight tilt of the head. The, oh wow, that must be so hard. The unsolicited advice from women who assumed he didn't know what he was doing because he was a man. Make sure she's eating enough iron. You should really get her into dance classes. Does she have a female role model in her life? Every comment well-meaning, every comment landing like a small blade between her ribs, because the answer to every question was the same. I'm doing my best. I'm doing it alone, and some days my best feels like it's not even close to enough. But Lily, God, that little girl made it worth it. She made everything worth it. She grew from a babbling toddler into a bright, curious, funny 8-year-old who asked questions about everything and remembered everything and had opinions about everything. She liked purple more than pink. She liked math more than reading. She liked rain more than sunshine, which James thought was strange, but also kind of beautiful. She was allergic to strawberries, which they found out the hard way at a church picnic when she was 3, and James had to rush her to the emergency room with hives covering her arms and his hands shaking so badly he could barely grip the steering wheel. She was afraid of thunder, but pretended she wasn't. She slept with a stuffed elephant named Peanut that Nicole had given her before she was born, and every night, without fail, she would tuck Peanut under the covers next to her and whisper, "Good night, Peanut," and then look at James and whisper, "Good night, Daddy," and James would whisper back, "Good night, baby," and turn off the light and stand in the hallway for a moment just listening to her breathe, just making sure she was there, just making sure she was real. Because sometimes late at night, the fear crept in, the irrational, suffocating fear that he would lose her too. That one morning he would wake up and Lily would be gone, the same way Nicole was gone, and he would be standing in an empty house with nothing but silence and the ghost of a family that used to exist. He never told anyone about that fear. Not Gloria, not Derek, not Dr. Perry. Some fears are too big to say out loud because the moment they leave your mouth, they start to feel possible, and James could not afford to let that fear feel possible.
So he kept it locked inside, and he checked on Lily every night, and he installed the security cameras, and he double-checked the locks, and he kept his phone volume on high at all times in case the school called, and he built a fortress around his daughter made of vigilance and routine and love so thick it could stop a bullet. Tuesday nights at Rosie's Diner were part of that fortress. It started about a year after Nicole left. Lily was 2.5. James was running on fumes. He hadn't taken a day off in months. Gloria had gone back to Detroit. Derek kept telling him he needed to get out of the house, even if it was just for an hour. So one Tuesday evening, James strapped Lily into her car seat and drove to the nearest place that wasn't their house, and it happened to be Rosie's, a little diner on the corner of Maple and 5th, with a neon sign that buzzed and flickered and a parking lot that was never more than half full. They went inside. Lily got chicken tenders, James got coffee because he was too tired to eat, and they sat in a booth by the window, and Lily colored on her kids' menu, and James just watched her, not thinking about Nicole, not thinking about bills, not thinking about anything except the fact that his daughter was sitting across from him, safe and smiling and alive. It became their thing. Every Tuesday, same booth if it was available, same waitress eventually, Donna, a heavy-set woman in her 50s with reading glasses around her neck and a laugh that could fill a gymnasium. Donna figured out pretty quickly that James was doing it alone. She never asked what happened, she never pried, she just started bringing extra fries for Lily and occasionally slipping James a slice of pie on the house with a wink that said, "I see you, I see what you're doing, and you're doing a good job." James never thanked her properly for that. He didn't know how to explain that a free slice of pie from a waitress at a diner was sometimes the only kindness he received all week, that her small gesture was a lifeline thrown to a drowning man who was too proud to admit he was underwater. This particular Tuesday started like all the others. James picked Lily up from aftercare at 4:35. She climbed into the back seat and immediately started telling him about her day in that breathless, run-on sentence style that 8-year-olds have perfected. "Daddy, did you know that we learned about volcanoes today? And also there's a volcano under Yellowstone, and if it erupts, it could destroy like half the country. And also Marcus H. got in trouble for throwing a crayon at Destiny. And also I think I want to be a scientist when I grow up, or maybe a vet because I really like animals, but not spiders because spiders are creepy." James listened to every word, nodded at the right moments, asked follow-up questions, not because he was particularly interested in Yellowstone's volcanic activity, but listening to his daughter talk was the closest thing to music he had in his life. They got to Rosie's at 5:15. The booth by the window was open. Lily slid in and immediately grabbed the crayon cup. James sat across from her and pulled out the laminated menu, even though he already knew what he was ordering. Donna came over. "Hey, sugar," she said to Lily. "The usual?" Lily nodded without looking up. Donna looked at James. "And for Dodd?" James smiled. "Club sandwich and a coffee." Donna scribbled it down and walked away, and everything was fine. Everything was normal. Everything was exactly the way it was supposed to be. Lily was drawing a cat. She was very focused on getting the whiskers right. James watched her tongue poke out the side of her mouth the way it always did when she was concentrating. He thought about how much she looked like Nicole in moments like these, the shape of her eyes, the way her forehead creased when she was thinking. It used to hurt to see Nicole and Lily's face. In the early months after she left, it was almost unbearable, like being haunted by someone who was still alive. But over time, the pain softened into something more complicated. Not quite acceptance, more like coexistence. Nicole's ghost lived in Lily's features, and James learned to look at it without flinching, most days. The food came. Lily ate her chicken tenders with surgical precision. 1 bite of chicken, 1 fry, 1 sip of apple juice. Repeat. James ate his sandwich and scrolled through his phone absently. Work emails, a text from Derek asking if he wanted to watch the game this weekend, a notification from Lily's school about a bake sale. Normal things, ordinary things, the kind of things that fill up a life so completely you forget that everything can change in a single second. His phone buzzed at 7:41. He remembered the exact time because he looked at the clock on the wall behind Lily's head right before he looked at the notification, and later that night when he was trying to piece everything together, he kept coming back to that number, 7:41. The notification was from Secure Home, the app he'd built his career around, the app he'd installed on his own system, the app he checked maybe once a week just to make sure everything was functioning properly. Motion detected, interior sensor, location, Lily's bedroom. His first instinct was to ignore it. Interior sensors get tripped sometimes. Not often, but sometimes. A curtain moving near a vent, a toy falling off a shelf. But the sensor in Lily's room was a thermal sensor. It detected heat signatures, not movement, which meant something warm was in that room. Something alive. James tapped the notification. The app loaded. The live feed connected, and for a moment, all he saw was darkness. The grainy, green-gray darkness of a night vision camera showing an empty room lit by the soft glow of a crescent moon nightlight plugged into the wall near Lily's bed. Then she stepped into frame. James's stomach dropped so fast he thought he was going to be sick right there in the booth. His hand gripped the phone so tight the case creaked. His vision narrowed. The sounds of the diner disappeared. Donna's laughed, the clinking of silverware, the country song playing on the jukebox. All of it vanished. The only thing that existed in the entire world was the 4-inch screen in his hand and the woman standing in the middle of his daughter's bedroom. He watched her move to the closet, watched her pull the doors open, watched her reach up and start pulling boxes down from the top shelf. She was frantic. That's the word that kept pounding in his head. Frantic. Not calm, not casual. She wasn't browsing. She wasn't reminiscing. She was searching for something specific with the urgency of someone running out of time. His mind was firing in every direction at once. How did she get in? Why is she there? What is she looking for? Is someone else in the house? Is she alone? Should he call the police? Should he call Derek? Should he tell Lily? No, not Lily. Never Lily. Not until he understood what was happening. He looked up from his phone. Lily was still coloring, still drawing that cat, still absorbed in her 8-year-old world where the biggest problem was getting the whiskers symmetrical. She had no idea that her mother was 15 minutes away, standing in her bedroom for the first time in 2 years. No idea that the woman whose face she inherited was right now pulling boxes out of her closet and looking over her shoulder every second like she was being hunted. His hands were shaking. He put the phone in his lap, took a breath, then another. His training kicked in. Not his emotional training, his professional training. Years of designing security systems for clients had taught him to think in protocols. Step 1, assess the threat. Step 2, secure the perimeter. Step 3, gather information before acting. He'd given that advice to hundreds of clients.
Sometimes the silence told more stories than the words, until it didn't. To hunker down and wait out the storm. Sometimes that was the only move you had. But those clients weren't watching their missing ex-wife on a security camera in their daughter's bedroom. Those clients didn't spend 2 years wondering if she was alive or dead. Those clients didn't cry into a pillow at 3 a.m. because the woman they loved vanished like smoke, and nobody would tell them why. Protocols don't work when the threat is personal. When the threat is someone you used to hold in the dark and whisper "I love you" to while she fell asleep on your chest. He picked the phone back up. Nicole was still searching. She'd found something now. A box. She was on her knees on the floor of the closet with a box open in front of her. James couldn't see what was inside, but he could see her reaction. Her whole body changed. Her shoulders dropped. She stopped moving. She sat back on her heels and stared into that box for what felt like forever. Then she reached inside and pulled something out and pressed it against her chest and just held it there. Then she stood up, slowly. She turned toward Lily's bed and she did something that James' breath catch in his throat. She walked over and sat on the edge of the bed, Lily's bed, the bed James tucked his daughter into every night, the bed where Peanut, the stuffed animal, lived. Nicole sat there and she picked up Peanut and she held that little stuffed animal against her face and her shoulders started shaking. She was crying. In her daughter's room, in the dark, alone, holding the stuffed animal that Lily couldn't sleep without, crying like a woman who lost everything and came back to touch the edges of what used to be hers. James felt something crack inside his chest. Not anger, not suspicion. Something deeper and more confusing, something that felt dangerously close to compassion, and he hated himself for it. He hated that after everything she put him through, after every sleepless night, after every unanswered question, after every time Lily asked where Mommy was and he had to make up another gentle lie, his first instinct watching this woman cry was to feel sorry for her. No, he couldn't do that. Not yet.
until he knew why she was there, until he knew what she was looking for, until he had answers to the questions that had been eating him alive for 723 days. He needed to get home, now. He pulled out his phone with his other hand and texted Derek, 3 words, "Get to my house." Derek responded in 8 seconds, "Everything okay?" James typed back, "Just get there now. Don't go inside. Wait outside. I'll explain when I get there." Derek didn't ask anything else. That was the thing about Derek. When it mattered, he didn't need explanations. He just showed up. James looked at Lily. She was finishing her cat drawing, adding a little bow on its head. She looked up at him and smiled that gap-toothed smile and said, "Daddy, look, I gave the cat a bow. Do you think cats would wear bows if they could?" James wanted to scream. He wanted to flip the table over and run to his car and drive 90 miles an hour to his house and throw open the front door and stand in front of Nicole and demand every answer she owed him. But he couldn't, because his daughter was sitting across from him with chocolate on her fingers and a crayon in her hand, and she was safe and happy and unaware, and it was his job to keep her that way for as long as possible. "That's a beautiful cat, sweetheart. I think cats would definitely wear bows." Lily grinned. "Can we get a cat, Dottie?" "We'll talk about it." "Hey, listen, how about we head home a little early tonight?" "Can I get ice cream first?" James looked at the screen one more time under the table. Nicole was still on the bed, still holding Peanut, still crying. He locked the phone, put it in his pocket, and smiled at his daughter with a steadiness that took every ounce of strength he had left. "Yeah, baby, you can get ice cream." He flagged Donna down, ordered a sundae. Lily's eyes lit up the way they always did when chocolate syrup was involved. She ate it slowly, savoring every bite, talking about cats and volcanoes and whether scientists could also be vets at the same time. And James sat across from her, nodding and smiling and responding at all the right moments, while inside his chest a war was raging, so violent he was surprised Lily couldn't hear it. Who was Nicole running from? What was in that box? Why did she come back after 2 years? How did she get inside? Was she still there? Was she going to be there when he got home? What if he was gone again by the time he arrived? Could he survive her disappearing twice? Could Lily? The ice cream was finished. James paid the check, left Donna a bigger tip than usual because he didn't know if he'd ever be back to this booth again, and he wanted to leave something good behind, just in case everything after this moment went bad. He helped Lily into her jacket, carried her tray to the trash, walked her out to the car, strapped her into her booster seat, got behind the wheel, and for 3 seconds before he turned the key, he just sat there, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, staring at the windshield, his reflection staring back, tired, scared, determined. A man who spent his whole life trying to outrun abandonment, about to drive directly towards it. He turned the key, pulled out of the parking lot, and drove towards home with his daughter singing softly in the back seat, and his phone burning a hole in his pocket, and a feeling deep in his gut that whatever he was about to walk into was going to change everything he thought he knew about his life. About Nicole. About Lily. About himself. Everything.
The drive home took 17 minutes. James knew that because he watched every single minute change on the dashboard clock. 7:52, 7:53, 7:54. Each number clicking forward like a countdown to something he couldn't name. Lily was in the back seat singing a song she learned at school, something about the planets. Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars. Her voice was soft and slightly off-key, and under any other circumstance it would have been the sweetest sound in the world. But tonight it sounded far away, like she was singing from the other side of a wall, like James was already somewhere else. His body was in the car, but his mind was in that bedroom, standing in front of Nicole, looking at her face for the first time in 2 years, trying to find words for a conversation he'd rehearsed 1,000 times in his head, but never actually expected to have. He checked his phone at a red light. The security app was still open. Nicole was no longer on the bed. She was moving through the hallway now, walking toward the living room. She still had something pressed against her chest, the thing from the box. James couldn't tell what it was. The camera quality was good, but not good enough to make out small details in low light.
She stopped in the living room, stood near the bookshelf, ran her hand along the spines of the books. Then she turned and looked up the couch. The same couch where James sat every night after Lily went to bed. The same couch where James used to sit with Nicole on Sunday mornings, drinking coffee and pretending the world outside didn't exist. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she pressed her hand against the armrest, gently, the way you touch something you're not sure you're allowed to touch anymore. James locked his phone and drove. He turned onto his street at 8:04. The first thing he saw was Derek's truck parked across the street from his house. Derek was sitting in the driver's seat with the window down. When he saw James's car, he stepped out immediately. James pulled into the driveway and killed the engine. He looked in the rearview mirror. Lily had fallen asleep, head tilted against the side of her booster seat, mouth slightly open. Peanut, the stuffed elephant, was not with her tonight because Peanut was at home in her bed, where Nicole had been holding him 20 minutes ago. James stared at his sleeping daughter for a long moment. She looked so peaceful, so untouched by everything that was about to happen. And he made a decision right there in that driveway that he would protect that peace at all costs. Whatever he was about to walk into, whatever he was about to learn, what Nicole had to say or not say, Lily would not be touched by it. Not tonight, not ever if he could help it. He got out of the car quietly and walked over to Derek. Derek was a big man, 6'3", broad shoulders, the kind of guy who looked intimidating until he opened his mouth and started making dad jokes that made everyone groan. He and Derek had worked together for 6 years, and somewhere along the way, the coworker thing had turned into a brotherhood. Derek was the one who showed up with groceries the week Nicole left. Derek was the one who assembled Lily's new bed when James couldn't figure out the instructions because his hands wouldn't stop shaking. Derek was the one who sat on the porch with James at midnight one night and didn't say a word for 2 hours, because sometimes the best thing a friend can do is just be there and not try to fix anything. Derek's face was serious, no jokes tonight. He looked at James and said, "What's going on, man? You look like you've seen a ghost." James almost laughed at that, almost, because that was exactly what he'd seen, a ghost with Nicole's shoulders and Nicole's hair, standing in his daughter's bedroom crying into a stuffed elephant. "Nicole's inside," James said. Derek's face went through about 5 different expressions in 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, anger, concern, and then something that settled into a hard, steady focus. "Inside the house?" James said. "Yeah." "Right now?" "She was 20 minutes ago. I saw her on the security camera." Derek looked at the house, then back at James. "You want me to go in with you?" James shook his head. "I need you to stay with Lily. She's asleep in the car. I don't want her waking up and walking into something she shouldn't see." Derek nodded, no argument, no questions. He walked over to James's car and opened the back door gently and positioned himself next to the sleeping child like a guard dog. James looked at him and felt a wave of gratitude so strong it almost knocked him sideways. In a life full of people who left, Derek was someone who stayed, and James would never forget that. He turned toward the house. The front porch light was on. He always left it on, a habit from his security background. Light discourages it. Darkness invites it. The front door looked normal at first glance. No signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no scratches around the lock. He pulled out his keys and realized his hands were trembling again. He steadied them, took a breath, inserted the key, turned the lock, pushed the door open. The house was quiet. Not the comfortable quiet of a home at rest, the tense quiet of a space that knows someone has been in it who shouldn't have been. He stood in the doorway for a moment, listening, waiting, his ears straining for any sound, a footstep, a breath, the creak of a floorboard. Nothing. He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. The living room looked normal at first glance, but then he noticed something. Small things, the kind of things only someone who lived in this house every day would catch. A book on the shelf was turned the wrong way. The couch cushion on the left side was slightly indented, like someone had leaned against it. And there was a smell, faint, almost gone, but there. A perfume he hadn't smelled in 2 years. Something floral and warm, and so painfully familiar that it hit him in the chest like a physical blow. She had been here, right here, standing where he was standing, breathing the air he was breathing, touching the things he touched every day. And now she was gone again. James moved through the house slowly. Kitchen, clear. Bathroom, clear. His bedroom. He paused at the door, pushed it open, scanned the room. The bed was made the way he'd left it that morning. Nothing disturbed, nothing out of place. He checked the closet. His clothes. Only his clothes. Nicole's side was empty for 2 years. He'd never filled it. He told himself it was because he didn't have enough clothes to justify using both sides, but the truth was he just never could bring himself to erase the space where her things used to be. Like keeping it empty was keeping a door open, a door he didn't want to admit he was still hoping she would walk back through. He moved down the hallway toward Lily's room. The door was open. He always left it open. Lily liked it open because she said closed doors made her feel like she was in a box. James stood at the threshold and looked inside. The room was a mess, not destroyed, not ransacked, but clearly searched. The closet doors were open wide. Boxes pulled down from the top shelf were scattered on the floor. Lily's baby blanket were unfolded and tossed aside. Stuffed animals moved from their usual spots. The top shelf of the closet, which James never really paid attention to because it was mostly old baby stuff, was completely cleared. Everything that had been up there was now on the floor. And in the middle of it all, sitting open on the carpet, was a box James had never seen before. It was a plain brown box, shoebox size, no label, no markings. It had been hidden behind a stack of baby blankets on the highest shelf of the closet, a place James never looked because there was no reason to look there. It was just storage, old onesies, receiving blankets from the hospital, things he kept because throwing away your child's baby stuff felt like throwing away memories, and he didn't have enough good memories to be careless with the ones he had. But this box wasn't his. He knelt down slowly, his knees cracking against the carpet. He could feel his heart in his temples now, that thudding pressure that comes when your body knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. He looked inside the box. Documents, a small stack of papers held together with a rubber band, an envelope sealed and unmarked, and underneath everything, a cell phone. Not a smartphone, a cheap prepaid flip phone, a burner. The kind you buy at a gas station when you don't want anyone to know you're making calls. James sat back on his heels. He stared at the contents of the box like a man who just discovered a bomb under his kitchen table. These things were hidden in his house, in his daughter's closet, behind baby blankets, by Nicole. Before she left or after, he didn't know, but she put them here, she hid them here, and 2 years later she came back for them. But she didn't take everything. The box was still here. The documents were still here. The phone was still here. Which means either she got what she needed and left the rest behind, or she was interrupted. She ran out of time. Maybe she saw something on her own phone. Maybe she heard James's car. Maybe the fear I saw in the security footage, the way she kept looking over her shoulder, wasn't about getting caught by James. Maybe she was afraid of someone else. James reached into the box and picked up the documents. His hands were steady now. That strange calm had returned, the one that settles over you when you've crossed the threshold of fear into something beyond it, something cold and focused and utterly still. He unfolded the first document. It was a medical form from a hospital, not the hospital where Lily was born, a different one, James had never heard of. The patient name at the top was Nicole's. The date was from 4 years ago, before Lily was born, before they were even married. James scanned the document, trying to make sense of what he was reading. Medical terminology he didn't fully understand, dates and procedure codes and physician signatures. But one section near the bottom caught his eye, a section labeled Patient History, with a handwritten note in the margin. The note read, Prior incident documented. See file M. Kavanaugh. James didn't know who M. Kavanaugh was. He didn't know what prior incident meant, but the coldness in his stomach told him it mattered. It mattered a lot. He set the document aside and picked up the next one. This one was different, not a medical form, a letter, typed on plain white paper, no letterhead, no signature, just text. And the first line of the first message made the hair on the back of James's neck stand straight up. Nicole, if you don't do what we... The girl. James read those 2 words 3 times. The girl. What girl? Lily? Was this about Lily? Who wrote this letter? Who was he? What terms? What had Nicole agreed to?
And why was this letter hidden in a box in her daughter's closet like evidence buried at a crime scene? James put the letter down. His hands weren't steady anymore. The calm was gone. Something else had replaced it. Something hot and electric and terrifying. The feeling you get when you realize that the life you've been living is not the life you thought it was. That there are rooms in your own house you've never entered. Chapters in your own story you've never read. That the woman you married and lost and mourned was carrying something so heavy that she chose to disappear rather than let it crush you too. James picked up the envelope, unsealed it. Inside was a single photograph, black and white. It showed a young girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. She was standing in front of a building James didn't recognize. She was looking directly at the camera with wide, dark eyes and an expression that was too serious for a child that young. On the back of the photograph, someone had written a name and a date in blue ink. James read the name, then read it again, then a third time, each time hoping the letters would rearrange themselves into something that made sense, something that didn't turn everything he knew upside down. They didn't. The name stayed the same, and it changed everything. He set the photograph down carefully, gently, like it might shatter if he held it too tightly. He looked at the burner phone sitting at the bottom of the box. He picked it up, flipped it open. The battery was dead. Of course it was. It probably had been sitting in that box for 2 years, slowly dying in the dark, the same way the truth had been slowly dying in the dark, waiting for someone to find it. James stood up, walked to the kitchen, found a charger that fit, plugged it in, stood over it with his arms crossed and watched the tiny screen flicker to life. 1 bar of battery, then 2. The phone buzzed once as old notifications loaded. Then again, then again. He waited. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, each minute lasting a lifetime. Then the phone had enough charge to function. He opened it, went to the text messages. There were dozens, maybe 100, sent and received over a period of multiple months, all before Nicole disappeared. All between Nicole and multiple contacts saved not by names, but by single letters. The letter M, the letter D, the letter V, which James assumed was Vanessa, and one contact saved as 2 words that made James's blood turn to ice. For James. A conversation labeled For James. Messages Nicole wrote to a contact named For James that were never sent. Drafts, unsent messages, things she typed out and saved but never had the courage or ability to deliver. Messages meant for him that he was never supposed to find unless she came back for the box and failed, unless whatever she was running from finally caught up. James opened the thread. The first message was dated 3 days before Nicole disappeared. He sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where he ate breakfast every morning, the same table where Lily did her homework, the same table where James sat 2 years ago staring at his phone, waiting for the police to call back with any information about his missing wife. He began to read, and the first line of the first message made him grip the edge of the table so hard his knuckles turned white. James read everything, and he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Even though every sentence felt like a knife sliding between his ribs, even though every paragraph rewrote a chapter of his life he thought he understood, even though by the time he reached the last message, his face was wet, and his hands were shaking, and the kitchen was so quiet he could hear the clock on the wall ticking like a heartbeat. He read everything, and when he was done, he sat in that kitchen for a very long time, not moving, not calling anyone, not crying anymore, just sitting,
staring at a cheap flip phone with a crocked screen that had just detonated every truth he ever held. The house was silent. Derek was outside with Lily. The night was pressing against the windows like it was trying to get in. And James sat at his kitchen table holding a dead woman's secrets in his hands and trying to figure out what kind of father he was supposed to be now that he knew what Nicole never told him, what Vanessa refused to explain, what was hidden in a box behind baby blankets, what brought a ghost back to his daughter's bedroom on a Tuesday night. The truth about Lily, and it was worse than anything he could have imagined.